I stood in the back of the venue watching my sister Olivia's wedding from behind a marble column, invisible to everyone who mattered. I wasn't supposed to be here. I hadn't been invited. But I needed to see this moment. The moment when my family finally realized the cost of their choices. "Has anyone seen Natalie?" My mother's voice cut through the chatter, sharp with panic. "The photographer wants family photos and we can't find her anywhere." I smiled, cold satisfaction spreading through my chest. Natalie, my niece. My brother David's daughter, who I'd been secretly mentoring for the past 3 years. The niece who'd asked me, not them, to help her prepare her valedictorian speech. The niece who'd confided in me about her college applications, her fears, her dreams. The niece who, as of yesterday, had decided she was done pretending our family was functional. "She's not coming," David said, his voice heavy with defeat. "She left me a note. She's staying with a friend. She says she's tired of pretending everything's fine when we all know it's not." My mother's face went white. "What are you talking about? Everything is fine. This is Olivia's wedding day." "Everything is not fine, Catherine." My father's voice was quieter than usual. And I think we all know why. I watched my mother look around frantically as if the answer would materialize from the expensive floral arrangements. Then her eyes landed on the empty seat in the front row, the one with "reserved family" written on a small placard, the one they'd added at the last minute 3 weeks ago when someone had apparently remembered I existed. Too little, too late. "She's not coming either, is she?" my mother whispered. "Maya." The name sounded strange coming from her lips. She hadn't said it with any real emotion in years, in either of my lives. "No," David said simply. "She's not, and frankly, I don't blame her." I felt the familiar burn of vindication, an emotion I'd never known in my first life, when I died at 28, alone and forgotten, while my family celebrated Olivia's birthday at an exclusive resort. They'd been too busy posting photos of her perfect party to notice I'd missed 3 days of calls. Too busy toasting her success to realize I was dying from complications of an illness I couldn't afford to treat properly. But that was my first life. This was my second. And this time, I'd learned that the best revenge wasn't showing up to hurt them. It was building a life so complete, so successful, so fulfilling, that their exclusion from it became their punishment. I turned and walked out of the venue before anyone could spot me. I had a plane to catch. My company's IPO was tomorrow, and unlike my sister's wedding, that was an event I actually cared about attending. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice rising in distress. How could she do this to Olivia on her special day? The irony was so perfect, it almost made me laugh. But I didn't laugh. I just kept walking, my heels clicking against marble, leaving behind a family who'd spent 28 years teaching me I didn't matter. They were about to learn exactly how much that lesson would cost them. The memories hit me the morning after my death, which was somehow also my 10th birthday. I woke up gasping in my childhood bedroom, the small, cramped room at the end of the hallway that my parents had given me while Olivia got the master bedroom suite because she was older and needed more space for her things. I was 10 again, small, plain, forgettable. And I remembered everything. I remembered 28 years of being invisible. I remembered dying alone. I remembered my family not even noticing until after the funeral arrangements had already been made by my landlord, who'd found me when the rent came due. But most of all, I remembered today, my 10th birthday, the day everything had started to crystallize into a clear pattern I'd spent 18 more years trying to deny. It was also Olivia's 13th birthday. Our birthdays were 3 years and 2 days apart. Mine on March 10th, hers on March 12th. In my first life, my parents had decided that having 2 birthday parties so close together was inconvenient and expensive. So they'd combined them, scheduling one big party on March 11th. Except it wasn't really a combined party. It was Olivia's party with my name added as an afterthought. I got out of bed slowly, my adult mind struggling to adjust to my child's body. I checked the date on my old digital clock, March 10th, my actual birthday. In my first life, I'd woken up excited, thinking maybe this year would be different. Maybe this year they'd acknowledge me. I'd been wrong then, but I wouldn't make the same mistake now. I found my mother in the kitchen, talking on the phone about party arrangements. Yes, pink and gold for Olivia. She's going to look like a princess. What? Oh, Maya's favorite color? Blue, I think. Just do a small blue accent. This is really Olivia's day. She's becoming a teenager. In my first life, I'd stood in the doorway and felt something crack inside me. I'd told myself it was fine, that I was being selfish, that of course Olivia's 13th birthday was more important than my 10th. This time, I just listened and learned. My mother hadn't even remembered my favorite color. It was purple, not blue. But she'd never asked, so she'd never known. My father came down the stairs, already dressed for work. Morning, Maya. Big party tomorrow. You excited? It's my birthday today, I said quietly. He blinked at me, confused. What? No, the party's tomorrow. We talked about this. I know, but my actual birthday is today. March 10th? Right. He waved his hand dismissively. But we're celebrating tomorrow. It's easier to do one party. You understand, right? You're a good kid. Not like those bratty children who insist on being the center of attention. The message was clear. Wanting to be acknowledged on my own birthday made me bratty. Being accommodating made me good. And good meant invisible. Sure, Dad, I said, my voice empty. He smiled, relieved. That's my girl. Now, I've got to run. Big meeting. I'll see you tomorrow at the party. He left without saying happy birthday. My mother continued her phone call, planning every detail of Olivia's celebration. And I stood there, 10 years old again with 28 years of memories, and I made my first important decision of my second life. I would never again beg for crumbs from people who wouldn't feed me. The combined birthday party the next day was exactly as I remembered. Pink and gold everywhere. A massive cake that said, Happy 13th birthday, Olivia, with, and Happy 10th Maya, squeezed in tiny letters at the bottom. All of Olivia's friends from school, plus some cousins and family friends. No one I'd invited because, as my mother had explained, we couldn't afford 2 separate guest lists. I wore a dress my mother had picked out, blue because she thought that was my favorite color. It was too big and unflattering. Olivia wore a designer dress that made her look like she was ready for a magazine shoot. Everyone complimented her. No one mentioned me. The presents were opened. Olivia got a new laptop, expensive jewelry, clothes from boutique stores, makeup sets. I got a $25 gift card to a bookstore and a stuffed animal that was clearly meant for a much younger child. Be grateful, my mother hissed when I didn't smile enthusiastically enough. Not everyone gets birthday presents at all. When it was time to sing happy birthday, they sang to Olivia first. Long, enthusiastic, everyone clapping and cheering. Then someone remembered me and they did a quick, half-hearted rendition with my name. Olivia blew out all the candles, both times. I watched all of this with my adult eyes, seeing clearly what I'd been too young and desperate to understand before. This wasn't about budget or convenience. This was about hierarchy. Olivia mattered. I didn't, and they were training me to accept it. In my first life, I'd spent the next 18 years accepting it, making myself smaller so Olivia could shine brighter, telling myself that family meant sacrifice, believing that if I was just good enough, patient enough, understanding enough, they'd finally see me. They never had. They'd never even tried. This time would be different. After the party, I went to my room and started planning. I had 18 years of knowledge about what was coming. I knew every betrayal, every disappointment, every moment they'd choose Olivia over me. And I knew how to prepare. The pattern continued exactly as I remembered. My 11th birthday, combined with Olivia's 14th, all focus on her starting high school. My 12th, Olivia's 15th, they threw her a quinceañera-style party despite not being Hispanic, just because she wanted one. Mine was mentioned in passing. My 13th, which should have been my own milestone, was overshadowed by Olivia's sweet 16. They rented a venue, they hired a DJ. They spent thousands of dollars. I got a homemade cake and dinner at a casual restaurant with just the immediate family, who spent the whole meal talking about how amazing Olivia's party had been the week before. It's not fair, I'd said quietly, my 13-year-old voice cracking. Life isn't fair, Maya, my father had responded, not even looking up from his phone. You need to learn that. Besides, Olivia's Sweet 16 is a once-in-a-lifetime event. You'll have yours in 3 years. But I never did. When I turned 16 in my first life, it was the same week as Olivia's college acceptance to Stanford. The celebration was all about her future, her achievement, her bright tomorrow. My birthday cake was an afterthought, bought from a grocery store at the last minute. This time, watching it all unfold again, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't make myself smaller to accommodate their cruelty. I just documented everything. Photos of the comparative spending, notes on who attended which celebration, records of every slight, every forgotten moment, every time they chose her over me. And I worked on myself. I'd been a talented writer in my first life, but I'd never pursued it because my parents said it wasn't practical. This time, I entered every writing contest I could find. I won. I published in youth literary magazines under a pen name. I built a portfolio. I'd been good at math too, but had been discouraged from pursuing STEM because Olivia was the smart one, and I shouldn't try to compete with her. This time, I studied anyway. I taught myself coding from library books and free online resources. By 14, I was building websites. By 15, I was freelancing and making money my parents didn't know about. Most importantly, I started looking for the secret I'd discovered only after my death in my first life. We had family money, real money. My grandmother, on my father's side, had left a trust fund meant to be split between all her grandchildren when they turned 18. But my parents had hidden my share, planning to give it all to Olivia and tell me the fund didn't exist. I'd found out in my first life only because a distant cousin had mentioned it at a family reunion I'd attended alone. My parents had gone with Olivia to tour colleges in Europe that week. The cousin had assumed I knew. When I'd confronted my parents, they'd said the money was already spent on Olivia's education, and there was nothing left for me. This time, I knew better. This time, I contacted my grandmother's lawyer when I was 16, pretending to need information for a school project about estate planning. The lawyer, who'd been increasingly suspicious of my parents' handling of the trust, was surprisingly willing to talk to me theoretically about how such trusts worked. Theoretically, he'd said carefully, if a grandparent left money in trust for multiple grandchildren with instructions for equal distribution, and one child didn't receive their share, that would be embezzlement. Theoretically, the wronged party could sue when they reached the age of majority. Theoretically, I'd replied, what if the wronged party didn't know about the trust until after the money was spent? Theoretically, that would be fraud as well, and theoretically, courts don't like it when parents steal from their own children. The statute of limitations wouldn't start until the child discovered the theft. I'd thanked him and left with a heart full of cold determination. My parents had stolen from me, actual money that was legally mine, and when I turned 18, I would take them to court for every penny. But I didn't wait until 18 to start building my exit strategy. At 16, I got legally emancipated. The process was easier than I'd expected because I could prove I had independent income from my freelancing, and when the social worker visited our house and saw my tiny room versus Olivia's suite, saw the family photos covering the walls with Olivia featured prominently and me barely visible in group shots, she'd looked at me with sad recognition. "You're not being abused," she'd said carefully. "Not in the way that would require removal. But you're not being treated equally either, are you?" "No, ma'am. And you think leaving is the best option?" "I think staying is teaching me to accept cruelty as love, and I'd rather not learn that lesson." She'd approved my emancipation. My parents had been shocked, then angry, then dismissive. "Fine," my mother had said. "If you want to be ungrateful and throw away your family, go ahead. But don't come crying to us when you fail." I'd moved into a small apartment I could afford with my freelancing income and a part-time job. I'd finished high school while working. I'd watched from a distance as my family continued their celebrations without me. Olivia's 18th birthday, a massive party, a new car, a trip to Paris. My 18th birthday, alone in my apartment, filing a lawsuit against my parents for my share of the trust fund. The legal battle was brutal. My parents hired expensive lawyers and tried to paint me as a greedy opportunist. But the grandmother's lawyer, who'd been the trustee, testified about their embezzlement. Bank records showed they'd taken over $200,000 that was meant for me and spent it on Olivia's education, her car, her lifestyle. The judge had been horrified. "You stole from your own child and then made her feel guilty for existing? You're lucky she's only suing for the money and not for emotional damages. I won. I got my $200,000 plus interest, plus damages, plus legal fees. My parents were ordered to pay over $300,000 total. It nearly bankrupted them. And I took that money and built an empire. I'd always been good with technology, but in my first life, I'd never had the confidence or resources to pursue it seriously. This time, with my settlement money and 18 years of future knowledge about which technologies would explode, I started a software company at 19. I hired talented developers, many of them women and minorities who'd been overlooked by traditional tech companies. I created a workplace culture based on merit and innovation, not politics or favoritism. And I built products that solved real problems. By 22, my company was valued at $10 million. By 25, it was $100 million. By 27, we were preparing for an IPO that would make me a billionaire. Through all of it, my family had tried to reconnect. At first, it was guilt-tripping. How can you abandon your family? Blood is thicker than water. I'd replied once, only once. The full saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. I've chosen. Then came the attempts at reconciliation. Birthday cards I returned unopened. Invitations to holidays I declined. Messages on social media I blocked. They tried to show up at my office, but security had their photos and instructions to escort them out. My brother David had been different. He was 5 years older than Olivia, had moved out before the worst of my mistreatment, and had always felt vaguely guilty about what he'd witnessed, but hadn't stopped. 3 years ago, he'd reached out with a genuine apology. "I should have protected you," he'd said when we met for coffee. "I was a coward. I knew what they were doing was wrong, but I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I'm sorry, Maya. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know I see it now. I see what they did." I'd studied him carefully, looking for manipulation, but all I saw was sincere regret. "Why now?" "Because I have a daughter." His eyes had filled with tears. "Natalie is 6. And the other day, Catherine suggested we do a joint birthday party for her and Olivia's future kids to save money and make things easier. And I saw the whole cycle about to repeat, and I knew I couldn't let it happen." That had been the beginning of our reconciliation. Slow, cautious, built on therapy and honest conversations. David had started setting boundaries with our parents. He'd stopped bringing Natalie to family events where their favoritism was on display. And gradually, carefully, he'd become something like a real brother. When Natalie turned 13, she'd reached out to me directly. "Aunt Maya, I know we don't really know each other, but Dad says you're really successful and really smart. And I'm trying to figure out my future, and could we maybe talk sometime?" I'd met with her, expecting to offer some career advice. Instead, I'd found a girl who reminded me painfully of my younger self. Smart, ambitious, but already learning to make herself small to keep the peace. "Grandma keeps saying I should be more like Aunt Olivia," she'd confided. "Less focused on school and more focused on being pretty and popular. She says boys don't like girls who are too smart." "Your grandmother is wrong," I'd said firmly. "And anyone who tells you to be less than you are is threatened by your potential." That had been 3 years ago. Since then, Natalie and I had met regularly. I'd mentored her, encouraged her, helped her apply to colleges. I'd watched her bloom into a confident young woman who didn't apologize for being brilliant. And yesterday, when she called me crying about her grandmother's latest commentary about her appearance and her unfeminine ambitions, I'd finally told her the truth about our family. About the birthdays, the stolen money, the systematic favoritism. About how they'd nearly destroyed me and would do the same to her if she let them. "You don't owe them your presence at events where they make you feel small," I'd told her. "You have the power to choose. You always have the power to choose." She'd chosen not to attend Olivia's wedding, and now, listening to my mother's panic from my hiding spot, I realized Natalie's absence mattered more to them than mine ever had. Because I'd been invisible so long they'd forgotten I existed. But Natalie was David's daughter. Her absence was visible, notable, impossible to ignore. and it raised questions they'd spent years trying to bury. I didn't go to my sister's wedding, but I heard about it in detail from David, who called me later that night. It was a disaster, he said, sounding exhausted. Not the ceremony itself, that was fine. But the photos, Maya, the family photos, there were all these gaps. You weren't there, Natalie wasn't there. And suddenly, everyone was asking questions. Where's your other daughter? I remember you had another sister. Isn't David's daughter part of the family? What did they say? Mom told people you and Natalie were sick. But Aunt Jennifer knows you're not sick because she follows your company on social media. She made a point of congratulating me very loudly on having such a successful sister right in front of Mom and Dad. He paused. Then she asked why you weren't at the wedding. And I told her the truth. I said you weren't invited until the last minute, and you declined because you had more important things to do than celebrate with people who've spent your entire life making you feel worthless. I felt a warm surge of gratitude. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. I've been complicit for too long. Natalie's been reading everything she can find about you, your interviews, your company profile, the articles about your success. She asked me why no one in the family ever talks about how amazing you are. And I didn't have a good answer. His voice cracked. I didn't have any answer except the truth. They're jealous, they're ashamed, and they don't know how to acknowledge they were wrong. David, let me finish. After the wedding, Dad pulled me aside. He wants to meet with you. He says it's time to put the past behind us and be a family again. He's planning to call you. I won't answer. I know, but Maya, you should know why he really wants to reconnect. David's voice turned bitter. Grandma Foster left another trust, a big one, to be distributed only to family members who are in good standing and regular contact. The lawyer is interpreting that literally. Since you've been no contact for 10 years, you might be excluded. But if they can prove you've reconciled, you could get back in. My laugh was cold. Let me guess. They already spent money they thought they'd get, and now they're in debt? Worse. Olivia's husband's family is old money. Really old money. The kind that investigates before they allow marriages. They've been asking questions about our family dynamics. They found out about the lawsuit, the stolen trust fund, the systematic favoritism. They're not happy. He paused. Olivia's marriage might not survive if she can't prove the family issues are resolved. And that starts with you. So they need me. They need you, David confirmed. For money, for social status, for Olivia's marriage. After spending your entire life treating you like you didn't matter, they finally need you to matter. And I thought you deserved to know before they showed up trying to manipulate you. I thought about this for a long moment. In my first life, this moment would never have come. I'd died before I could become successful enough to be useful to them. But in this life, I'd built something they couldn't ignore. And now they wanted back in. Thank you for the warning, I said finally. And David, tell Natalie I'm proud of her. She made the right choice. I will. And Maya, I'm proud of you too. I know I don't have the right to say that, but it's true. After we hung up, I sat in my penthouse apartment looking out at the city lights, and I thought about revenge. I'd spent years telling myself that my success was enough, that living well was the best revenge, that I didn't need them to acknowledge their mistakes, but now they were coming for me. They wanted something from me, and I had the power to give it or deny it. The question was, what would hurt them most? My father called 3 days after the wedding. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to hear what he'd say after 10 years of silence. Maya, his voice was artificially cheerful. Sweetheart, I've been trying to reach you for so long. You've had my number for 10 years, Dad. You haven't called once. Well, you know how it is. Busy, busy. But listen, we need to talk. There's a family matter that requires your attention. I'm not interested in family matters. I haven't been part of the family for a decade. Don't be ridiculous. You're always part of this family. Blood is blood. Now there's been a misunderstanding about Grandma Foster's estate, and the lawyers need all of us to... Let me stop you right there, I interrupted, my voice ice cold. I know about the trust. David told me. And I know you only called because you need something from me. So let's skip the pretense. What exactly do you want? Silence, then grudgingly. The trust requires proof of family reconciliation. We need you to meet with the lawyer, sign some paperwork saying we're in regular contact. And if I don't, then you're punishing the whole family out of spite. Is that really who you are, Maya? Someone who'd hurt her own mother and sister over ancient history? Ancient history? My voice was dangerously quiet. You stole $200,000 from me. You made me feel invisible my entire childhood. You forgot my birthdays. You excluded me from family events. You told me I was selfish for wanting the bare minimum of acknowledgement. That's not ancient history. That's who you are. We made mistakes, he admitted, and I could hear the calculation in his voice. We weren't perfect parents, but we did our best, and surely that counts for something. And think about Olivia. She's your sister. Don't you want her to be happy? Did Olivia ever want me to be happy? Did you? Did Mom? I paused. I'll answer for you. No. You didn't care if I was happy as long as I was convenient. As long as I didn't cause problems or demand attention, well, I'm not convenient anymore and I don't owe you anything. You're being incredibly selfish. Good. I learned from the best. I hung up. My mother called next, then Olivia, then my father again. I blocked all their numbers. Then they started showing up at my office, my apartment building, trying to force conversations I didn't want to have. Each time, security removed them. Each time, I documented it. And each time, I felt the weight of 10 years of therapy and boundary setting proving its worth. But then Olivia did something I hadn't expected. She went public. She posted on social media a long, emotional post about family estrangement and the pain of having a sister who won't forgive. She painted herself as the victim, the heartbroken sibling reaching out to a cold, successful sister who'd abandoned her family for money and fame. I just want my sister back, she wrote. I know we weren't perfect, but family should forgive. Family should try. I don't understand how someone can build $1 billion company but can't find time for her own family. Money isn't everything. Love is. And I love my sister, even though she won't speak to me. It went viral. Suddenly, I was the villain in a story I'd never agreed to tell. Think pieces appeared about successful women who forget where they came from. Talk shows discussed whether family forgiveness was mandatory. People I'd never met had opinions about my choices. My PR team panicked. We need to respond. This is affecting the company's image. Investors are asking questions. No, I said calmly. We're not responding. Not yet. But trust me, because I knew something Olivia didn't. I'd spent 10 years documenting everything. Every birthday invitation that wasn't sent, every family photo I'd been excluded from, every time they'd chosen her party over acknowledging mine, every message they'd sent trying to guilt me back into contact, every security camera footage of them being escorted from my building. And I had something else. Natalie, who'd been watching her grandmother and aunt manipulate the narrative and was furious about it. Aunt Maya, she'd called me, crying with anger. They're lying. Grandma told Aunt Olivia exactly what to say to make you look bad. I heard them planning it. They think if they turn public opinion against you, you'll have to reconcile to save your company's reputation. It's okay, I told her. Let them think it's working. But people are saying terrible things about you. People always say terrible things about successful women who set boundaries. The truth will come out. I'm just choosing when and how. And I chose the day of my company's IPO. The morning the company went public was perfect. Clear skies, comfortable temperature, the kind of day that felt like the universe was aligning. I was scheduled for interviews with major business networks, and I knew my family would be watching, waiting to see if I'd address the estrangement controversy. I dressed in a sharp suit, purple, my actual favorite color, and prepared for battle. The first interview started with the expected questions about the company, our growth, our vision. Then the interviewer leaned forward with a practiced expression of concern. There's been a lot of public interest in your personal life recently. Your sister posted about a family estrangement. Some critics say you're choosing business over family. How do you respond? I smiled. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. I'm glad you asked. I'd like to address this directly because the story that's been told publicly isn't complete. I looked directly at the camera. My sister posted about wanting her sister back, but she didn't mention why I left in the first place. Why did you leave? Because for 28 years of my first life and 18 years of this one, my family made it clear that I didn't matter. Every birthday was combined with my sister's and turned into her celebration. Every achievement was overshadowed by her milestones. Every request for acknowledgement was treated as selfishness. I kept my voice steady, factual. When I was 18, I discovered they'd stolen over $200,000 from a trust fund my grandmother left me. They spent it on my sister's education and lifestyle while telling me there was no money for my college. I had to sue my own parents to get what was legally mine. The interviewer's eyes widened. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, it's documented fact. There are court records. I can provide them. I paused. My family is claiming I abandoned them. The truth is, I set boundaries after decades of neglect and abuse. And now, coincidentally, when they need something from me, access to another trust fund that requires proof of family unity, suddenly they want to reconcile. Suddenly, I'm the villain for not forgiving on demand. What do you say to people who believe family should forgive? I say that forgiveness doesn't mean giving people unlimited chances to hurt you. Reconciliation requires acknowledgement, change, and amends. My family has offered none of those things. They've only offered manipulation and public guilt-tripping designed to pressure me into compliance. I leaned forward. I'm not against forgiveness. I'm against abuse. And teaching young people, especially young women, that they must accept mistreatment from family because family is dangerous. The interview went viral within hours. My phone exploded with messages. Some people called me brave, others still thought I was cold. But most importantly, other people started sharing their own stories of family scapegoating, of being the overlooked child, of finally choosing themselves. The business networks picked it up, then mainstream media. Within 24 hours, investigative journalists had found the court records from my lawsuit against my parents. They'd traced the pattern of family photos on social media showing me rarely included. They'd interviewed former neighbors and teachers who confirmed the disparate treatment. My mother and Olivia tried to do damage control, claiming they'd been misunderstood, that things had been taken out of context. But the evidence spoke for itself. And when Natalie posted her own statement supporting me and detailing the manipulation she'd witnessed, the narrative shifted completely. My grandmother and aunt tried to use social media to guilt my Aunt Maya into breaking her boundaries, Natalie wrote. I watched them plan it. They don't want reconciliation. They want access to her success and money. Real family doesn't treat people this way. Aunt Maya taught me that it's okay to walk away from people who make you small, even if they're blood relatives. That's the most valuable lesson I've ever learned. David posted, too, a simple statement. I failed to protect my sister when we were young. I won't fail to tell the truth now. Everything Maya has said is accurate. Our parents played favorites for decades. It destroyed one daughter and spoiled the other. The real tragedy is that it took Maya cutting us off for me to see it clearly. My family's social standing imploded. Olivia's in-laws quietly pushed for an annulment, citing misrepresentation of family circumstances in the premarital agreements. My parents' friends started distancing themselves, not wanting to be associated with people who'd stolen from their own child. And through it all, my company's IPO was wildly successful. Investors saw someone who stood by her principles even when it was difficult. Customers saw a CEO who wouldn't be bullied into compliance. By the end of the first day of trading, I was worth over $2 billion. That evening, my father called from a number I hadn't blocked yet. I answered. Are you happy now? He asked, his voice broken. You've destroyed this family? No, Dad. You destroyed this family 28 years ago when you decided one daughter mattered and the other didn't. I just finally stopped pretending it was fine. We needed that trust money. We're drowning in debt. Olivia's marriage is falling apart. Your mother is having a breakdown, and you're sitting in your penthouse not caring? You're right, I don't care. Do you know why? My voice was calm, clinical even. Because when I was dying in my first life, alone in a shitty apartment, my phone full of unanswered calls for help, you were all at Olivia's birthday party at an exclusive resort. You were so busy celebrating her that you didn't notice I was dying. It took 3 days for anyone to realize I was dead. 3 days. And you know what my last thought was? That I was sorry for being such an inconvenience? Your first life? Maya, what are you talking about? I'm saying that I already died once from the pain of being invisible to you, and I'm not doing it again. Whatever financial problems you have, whatever social consequences you're facing, those are the natural results of your choices, not my responsibility. But we're your family. No, I interrupted. Family is people who show up for you, who remember your birthday, who treat you like you matter. You taught me I wasn't family. I finally learned the lesson. I hung up and blocked the number. The aftermath was brutal for them. My parents had to declare bankruptcy. Their house, the one with Olivia's massive bedroom suite and my tiny attic room, was foreclosed on. Olivia's marriage ended in a messy divorce that left her with almost nothing because the prenup she'd signed assumed family money that no longer existed. David was the only one who landed on his feet. He'd already started distancing himself from our parents before everything went public, and his honest support of me actually helped his reputation. He and Natalie both thrived, building their own paths separate from the toxic family dynamics. But my mother, father, and Olivia struggled. They'd built their entire identities on an image of a perfect family with a perfect golden child, and that image had shattered. The social circles they'd valued so much closed to them. The lifestyle they'd maintained through credit and expectation of inheritance evaporated. They tried to use the media to redeem themselves, giving interviews about how they'd made mistakes and wanted to make amends. But their version of amends always came with conditions. If Maya would just give us a chance, or if she'd help us get back on our feet. I never responded publicly. I didn't need to. I'd told my truth once, provided evidence, and moved on. I had a company to run, a life to build, and no interest in their continued attempts to make themselves victims of my boundary setting. 5 years after my company went public, I was keynoting a Women in Business conference. The topic was overcoming adversity, and I'd prepared remarks about building confidence and taking risks. But standing at that podium, looking out at thousands of faces, I realized the real story wasn't about business strategy. It was about something simpler and more profound. I want to talk about birthdays, I began, and I saw some confused looks. Specifically about whose birthday matters. In my family, my birthday never mattered. It was always combined with my sister's, always secondary to hers, always treated as an inconvenience rather than a celebration. And I learned from that experience that I was an inconvenience, that I should make myself smaller, that wanting to be acknowledged was selfish. The room was completely silent. It took me dying, metaphorically speaking, and rebuilding my life from nothing to realize the truth. The problem wasn't that I wanted acknowledgement. The problem was that I was surrounded by people who couldn't give it. And once I understood that, everything changed. I paused, letting that sink in. The business advice I'm supposed to give you today is about market analysis and risk assessment and building sustainable growth models. And that's all important. But the real advice, the advice that changed my life, is simpler. If people make you feel like you don't matter, believe them. Believe that they're showing you who they are. And then decide whether you want those people in your life. I stopped going to family events where I was an afterthought. I stopped answering calls from people who only reached out when they needed something. I stopped making myself small to accommodate people who would never make space for me. And you know what happened? I had room to grow. I had energy for people who actually valued me. I built something extraordinary because I wasn't wasting resources on people who would never appreciate them. I looked out at the audience, seeing so many women who probably had similar stories of being overlooked, underestimated, trained to be accommodating at the expense of themselves. So here's my advice. Know your worth, set your boundaries, and never, ever let anyone convince you that choosing yourself is selfish. The people who call you selfish for having boundaries are the same people who benefited from you having none. The applause started slowly, then built to a standing ovation. Afterward, women lined up to talk to me. So many of them had stories like mine. Families who'd overlooked them, people who'd made them feel small, relationships where they'd given everything and received nothing. Thank you, one young woman said, tears streaming down her face. My family has been pressuring me to loan them money I don't have, and I felt so guilty for saying no. But you're right, they never helped me. Why should I destroy myself to help them? You shouldn't, I told her firmly. Your first responsibility is to yourself. Everything else is optional. That night, David called. I watched your keynote online. It was powerful, Maya, really powerful. Thanks. Mom and Dad watched it too. He paused. Mom called me crying. She said she finally understands what she did to you, that she sees it now. Good. She wants to write you a letter, not asking for anything, just apologizing, really apologizing. Would you be willing to read it? I thought about this carefully. I'd spent years building walls to protect myself from their manipulation. But I'd also spent years in therapy learning that healing didn't mean staying angry forever. She can write it, I said finally. I'll read it. But David, I want you to understand something. Even if I read it, even if I believe she's sincere, that doesn't mean I'm letting them back into my life. That doesn't mean we're family again. Some things can't be fixed, only accepted. I understand, and honestly, I think that's probably healthiest for everyone. The letter came 2 weeks later. It was long, handwritten, and surprisingly honest. My mother detailed every mistake she remembered, every time she'd chosen Olivia over me, every moment she'd made me feel invisible. She didn't make excuses or try to justify her behavior, she just acknowledged it. I don't expect forgiveness, she wrote at the end. I don't deserve it. I destroyed my relationship with my daughter because I was too proud to admit I was playing favorites, too invested in Olivia's success to see I was sacrificing yours. I turned you into a support system for your sister instead of letting you be your own person. And by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. You'd already learned not to need me. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, even though I have no right to be. And I'm sorry, not because I want anything from you, but because you deserved to hear it. I read it 3 times, looking for manipulation, for hidden agendas, for the catch. I found none. Just genuine, painful recognition of harm done. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. I kept it in a drawer, a document of acknowledgement I'd waited 3 decades across 2 lifetimes to receive. 10 years after my company went public, I was featured in a documentary about women who'd built billion-dollar businesses from nothing. The filmmaker wanted to explore not just my business success, but my personal journey. You've been very open about your family estrangement, she said during our interview. Do you have any regrets about how things unfolded? I considered the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my family couldn't love all their children equally. I regret that I had to choose between my well-being and their approval. But do I regret leaving? No, never. Your mother wrote you a letter of apology several years ago. You've never spoken publicly about whether you forgave her. Because it's not relevant. Forgiveness is personal. It's not a performance for public consumption. I paused. But I'll say this. I've made peace with what happened. I understand my parents were flawed people who prioritized one child over another, probably because of their own damage and limitations. I don't hate them. I just don't trust them. And you don't need to maintain relationships with people you can't trust, even if they're family. Some people would say that sounds lonely. I smiled. Some people don't understand the difference between being alone and being lonely. I have friends who show up for my birthday every year. I have David and Natalie who've done the work to build real relationships with me. I have a company full of people I respect and who respect me. I have a life full of meaning and purpose. I looked directly at the camera. I'm not lonely. I'm free. And freedom feels a lot better than family obligation ever did. The documentary won awards and sparked new conversations about family toxicity and the pressure on children, especially daughters, to accept mistreatment in the name of family unity. Olivia watched it. I know because she sent me an email, the first communication from her in 8 years. You won, she wrote simply. You won everything, the money, the success, the respect, the moral high ground. I hope it makes you happy. I hope it was worth destroying what was left of our family. I almost didn't respond. But something in her email, the bitter defeat, the refusal to even now take responsibility, made me want to have the last word. I didn't destroy our family, I wrote back. I just stopped pretending it existed. There's a difference. And yes, it makes me happy. Every single day, it makes me happy to know I'm not setting myself on fire to keep you warm anymore. I hope someday you understand that the problem was never me wanting acknowledgement. The problem was you thinking you deserved it all. Her response came immediately. I was a child. They made me the favorite. What was I supposed to do? You were a child, but you grew into an adult who continued the pattern. You had years to recognize what was happening and choose differently. You never did. Not until there were consequences you couldn't avoid. She didn't reply after that, and I turned 48 on March 10th, 20 years after my company's IPO, 38 years after my first death, and 18 years after I'd last spoken to most of my family. I celebrated with a party I threw for myself, 60 close friends, colleagues, and chosen family. David and Natalie were there. So was Mrs. Richardson, my favorite high school teacher who'd noticed my writing talent when my own parents hadn't. So were the first employees I'd hired, some of whom had become millionaires through their stock options. The party was everything my childhood birthday celebrations had never been, focused entirely on me, full of people who genuinely wanted to celebrate me, filled with joy and laughter and belonging. Someone asked about my birthday wish as I blew out the candles. I don't need to wish for anything, I said honestly. I already have everything I wanted. Because I did. I had success. I had genuine relationships. I had self-respect. I had a life built entirely on my own terms, with no one making me feel small or invisible or secondary. My mother had died 2 years earlier. I'd heard about it through David, who'd stayed in minimal contact with her despite everything. He asked if I wanted to attend the funeral. No, I'd said simply. I mourned that relationship years ago. This is just making it official. He'd understood. He'd gone alone, and he'd told me later that it was a small service, poorly attended. Olivia had been there, still bitter, still convinced she was the victim of my success. My father had been there, diminished by age and regret, barely speaking. She left you something, David had said. A letter. The lawyer says she wrote it years ago and updated it regularly. She wanted you to have it after she died. I'd debated reading it, but curiosity won out. The letter was short. Maya, you were right about everything. I failed you. I made you invisible because I couldn't handle the guilt of loving one child more than the other. So I pretended it wasn't happening. I told myself you were fine, that you didn't need as much attention as Olivia, that you were strong enough to handle being overlooked. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I found it easier to love Olivia. She was charismatic, demanding, impossible to ignore. You were quiet, self-sufficient, easy to overlook. And I took the easy path. I'm sorry I never found the courage to tell you this while I was alive. I'm sorry I never tried to earn back your trust. Most of all, I'm sorry that you had to build your entire life around the wound I gave you. You deserved a mother who celebrated you. I hope you found people who do. Love, Mom. I'd read it once and put it away. The apology was real, but it was also too late. Some wounds heal with acknowledgement. Others just scar over and you learn to live with them. But standing at my 48th birthday party, surrounded by people who actually showed up for me, I realized something. I'd won not because I'd punished my family, but because I'd built something better than what they'd offered me. They'd given me crumbs and told me to be grateful. I'd left and baked my own cake. Multiple cakes. A whole bakery. And every year on March 10th, I celebrated that victory. 25 years after going public, I was preparing to retire and transition the company to new leadership. I'd built something lasting, something that would continue to provide opportunities for people like me, the overlooked, the underestimated, the ones who'd been told to be smaller. Olivia reached out one last time. She was 62 now, alone, struggling financially after a life of bad decisions and burned bridges. She wanted to meet. Against my better judgment, or maybe because I was curious about closure, I agreed. We met at a neutral coffee shop, two strangers who happened to share DNA and a toxic childhood. She looked tired, used up. All the beauty and charisma that had been the focus of our parents' attention had faded, leaving someone who'd never developed substance beneath the surface. Thank you for meeting me, she said quietly. I almost didn't. I know. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. I've been in therapy for 5 years, real therapy, not just complaining about my problems. My therapist helped me see everything: how I was raised, how it damaged me too, just differently. How I never learned to work for anything because everything was handed to me. How I treated you. Okay, I'm not asking for forgiveness, she continued. I don't deserve it. I'm just asking if you'd be willing to listen, because you're the only person who knows the truth about how we grew up. And I need to say this to someone who understands. I nodded slowly. I'll listen. She talked for over an hour about how being the favorite had been its own prison, never knowing if people liked her or just wanted access to resources through her, never developing real skills because she'd never needed to, never learning to fail gracefully because she'd so rarely been allowed to fail, about how she'd watched me build an empire and realized she'd never learned how to build anything because everything had been given to her. The worst part, she said, tears streaming down her face, is that I think I always knew. Even as a kid, I knew what they were doing to you was wrong. But I liked being special. I liked being the favorite. And I told myself you didn't mind, that you didn't care, that you were fine. She wiped her eyes. But you weren't fine. You were dying inside. And I let it happen because it benefited me. Yes, I said simply. You did. I don't know how to make it right. You can't. Some things can't be fixed, Olivia. They can only be acknowledged and learned from. Then I'm acknowledging it. I'm sorry. Not the performative sorry from years ago when I wanted something from you. Really sorry. You deserved better. You deserved parents who celebrated both of us. You deserved a sister who protected you instead of participating in your erasure. She looked at me with genuine grief. I'm sorry, Maya. I'm so sorry. We sat in silence for a long moment. I believe you, I said finally. I believe you're sorry. I believe you understand now what you did. But Olivia, understanding doesn't undo it. You and Mom and Dad taught me that I didn't matter. And even though I proved you wrong, even though I built a life that matters enormously, that wound is still there. I've healed around it, but the scar remains? I know. So this is where we are. I believe your apology. I accept that you've grown and changed, but we're not going to be sisters. We're not going to rebuild a relationship. We're just two people who shared a toxic childhood and went in different directions. She nodded, crying quietly. That's fair. That's more than fair. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to be, but I am. You took everything they did to you and turned it into something incredible. You're everything I pretended to be. After she left, I sat alone with my coffee, thinking about the two versions of my life. In the first, I'd died alone and forgotten, never having stood up for myself. In the second, I'd built an empire on the foundation of refusing to accept crumbs. Both versions had pain, but only one had power. I finished my coffee and went back to my office, where I spent the afternoon with my successor, a brilliant woman who reminded me of my younger self. Hungry, talented, overlooked by traditional institutions. We reviewed strategies and discussed vision, and I felt satisfied knowing the company would be in good hands. That evening, I went home to my penthouse, looked out at the city I'd conquered, and thought about birthdays. All those birthdays where I'd been secondary, invisible, forgotten. All those parties that weren't really for me. And I smiled, because every day now was a celebration of the choice I'd made. To leave, to build, to become someone who couldn't be overlooked or forgotten or made small. They'd chosen Olivia's birthday parties over mine, so I'd chosen myself over all of them, and I'd won. Not because I'd destroyed them, though there had been consequences for their actions. Not because I'd punished them, though justice had been served. But because I'd built a life so fulfilling, so successful, so undeniably meaningful that their approval no longer mattered. I was the woman who'd died forgotten and been reborn into power. The woman who'd turned invisibility into visibility. The woman who'd proven that sometimes the best revenge isn't showing up to hurt people who hurt you. It's building something so magnificent they can't help but see what they lost. Every year on March 10th, I celebrated that truth. My birthday, my day, my life, my choice, and every year it got sweeter.